There's currently a big debate on both sides of the Atlantic about the vaccine passport. No, not the vaccine. I'm not talking about the vaccine. I'm talking about the vaccine passport. According to the UK government, COVID passports will, quote, become a likely feature of our lives. This is what a mock-up of the vaccine passport looks like. Name, photograph, date of birth. Kind of reminds me of something. Something that starts with ID and ends in card. Oh yeah, it's a digital ID card. The same thing that in 2004 Boris Johnson said was, quote, a recipe for tyranny and oppression.
A recipe for tyranny and oppression as well. And that's why I oppose the scheme. I'm on record as saying that if I am, in the unlikely event that this scheme comes to fruition, if I'm obliged to have an ID card by the emanations of the state, then I will take that ID card and I will snip it up and I will grind it in a Boulenex and I will eat it on my cornflakes.
So what changed, Boris? There are also plans to link it to the facial recognition surveillance network. The UK government has already given grants to 2 companies building this technology. Andrew Budd, the CEO of one of these companies, iProve, asserts that trying to check tens of thousands of vaccine passports at major events will be too slow. So digital face scans which permit entry will be introduced as the streamlined solution. And there you were thinking you'd happily show a small piece of paper to get into a football match. Without knowing, you just unwittingly stumbled into the Minority Report.
Stressed out, John Anderton.
Escape from it all, Harrison. Get away, John Anderton. Forget your troubles. What's slow, John Anderton?
China, which has universally been praised by health authorities and governments in the West for its response to the COVID outbreak, has already linked its coronavirus tracking program to its social credit score system.
The idea that this could, for example, be used for totalitarian social monitoring, well, this has now become a reality in China. The local government of China's Jiangsu province has launched a new social control system that combines the CCP's health code program with the regime's social credit system to create what they're calling a, quote, civilization code. This new system gives people a civilization score, which ranks them into different levels. And this level is then used by the government to judge who gets priority or who should be subjected to restrictions or punishments.
What is the social credit score system? It's a centralized database linked to internet activity, purchase history, and general behavior, which punishes citizens for a whole host of minor infractions, including bad driving, smoking on trains, buying too many video games, buying too much junk food, buying too much alcohol, calling a friend who has a low social credit score, having a friend online who has a low social credit score, posting fake news online, visiting unauthorized websites, walking your dog without a leash, or letting your dog bark too much. And how do the authorities punish those who commit these deadly sins? In 2019, Beijing bragged about how it had prevented 2.5 million discredited entities from purchasing plane tickets and 90,000 people from buying high-speed train tickets in the month of July alone.
我现在是已经被限制这个自由的出行了，就是订票啊，我们高铁和飞机都不行。我跟你演示一下，我们用这个 APP 来订票。现在是我们从重庆到西安，我们来订一张票，订一张过几天的票。
And what does it say?
然后就显示那个出票失败。说我已经被法院依法限制高消费，限制乘坐 G 字头列车。
That's reserved for members of our Prime Flight program. You got to be a 4.2 or over to qualify.
Oh, I'm a 4.2.
I'm afraid you're actually a 4.183.
The very same kind of restrictions that will be imposed on people in the West who don't have the vaccine passport. Recall that Professor Neil Ferguson, one of the primary UK advisors whose warning of 500,000 dead led to our lockdown, expressed surprise that they were able to get away with mimicking the draconian measures taken by China in response to the pandemic. And according to the founder of data firm Panda, the Chinese government has even asked the WHO for permission to run a global vaccine passport system.
I'm motivated here by fear for what is going to happen to our world, to the fabric of our society. I'm worried about the future of my children. China is petitioning the World Health Organization to appoint it to run a global immune passport program. Now, if that doesn't scare the living daylights out of you, I do not know what will. This kind of centralization, this kind of control, social credit systems, that's dystopia for you.
Prominent figures like Ian Brown, who publicly opposed the vaccine passport, are immediately targeted for cancellation by the mob. The most prominent supporter of vaccine passports from the very start was Tony Blair, who, as I'm sure you're aware, isn't noted for his moral beneficence. Journalists for mainstream news outlets like the LA Times' Harry Litman are salivating at the prospect of imposing the vaccine passport to, quote, break the resistance down. Litman's comment sounds like something an evil character in a dystopian thriller about a high-tech dictatorship would say. And that's precisely the point. The vaccine passport is the opening salvo of what eventually could become the Chinese social credit system mirrored in the West.
The vaccine passport platform is the same platform as a social credit system. In China, the CCP can find any dissident in 5 minutes because of the 360-degree surveillance of the social credit system. And it means that when you act like a good citizen, you get a boost, and when you act like a bad citizen, opportunities get closed to you. Maybe your child doesn't get into college or get into prep school. Maybe, you don't get that job, you don't get that promotion. The vaccine passport that is being proposed in the rest of the West is the same platform. This is the most dangerous tool that humanity has faced in my lifetime, if not ever, in terms of human liberty.
So you don't have to be an ardent anti-vaxxer to realise what a horrific precedent the vaccine passport would set. Fine, get the vaccine. I'm sure it's perfectly logical for someone under the age of 50, who according to the CDC has a 99.98% chance of surviving COVID, to take the vaccine. But a vaccine passport, a digital ID card based on your level of compliance with government mandates, empowering the state to restrict the basic freedoms of those who, for whatever reason, don't fully comply, keeping millions of people under a de facto permanent state of lockdown, preventing them from enjoying basic leisure activities and God knows what else in the future. Don't forget, France even tried to pass a law banning those who didn't take the jab from using public transport. A German geneticist said people who refuse the shot should be denied medical treatment. Canada's current chief public health officer appeared in a 2010 documentary in which she advocated using mandatory tracking bracelets for people who refuse to take a vaccine after a virus outbreak.
If there are people who are non-compliant, there are definitely laws and public health powers that can quarantine people in mandatory settings. It's potential you could track people, put bracelets on their arms, have police and other setups to ensure quarantine is undertaken.
That's not just a vaccine passport. That's a two-tier society. That's a communist Chinese-style social credit score system for the West. Orwell rolls in his grave. The last thing you see after your social credit score hits 0. The government has suggested that they could reassure the public by promising to scrap vaccine passports after a year. And you can surely trust them, right? Just like you could trust them for months when they told us domestic vaccine passports were not even being considered. Now, we know as far back as December, the government was paying a Swiss company to research how the public would react to vaccine passports, while simultaneously telling the public they were off the table. They're now encouraging grandparents to scan their own family members' vaccine passports at home before agreeing to see them. This is reaching Mickey Mouse levels of absurdity. We're seeing more tweets like this, where grandparents and parents are refusing to let their own kids visit because they don't want to take the vaccine. The fabric of society is being further ripped apart as families become more atomized from each other. Oh, but Boris did us such a great favour. He vowed no vaccine passports to visit the pub. Yeah, not yet. They're already making sounds that that's going to be readdressed in the future as well. And anyway, that's classic PR mind games. They frighten everyone with overwhelmingly draconian suggestions, Then we're supposed to be grateful when they relent just a little bit. And now every single person who visits a pub and a restaurant has to feed all their details into the NHS tracking database anyway.
What's your name?
Bill.
Bill.
Bill Carr.
But ironically, this could all get shot down before it even gets off the ground. Because as we know from the voter ID controversy currently raging in America, having to show ID is racist. Seriously, this of all things, concern over racism is what actually could derail it. For example, there are at least 1 million illegal immigrants living in the UK. Very few of them are going to want to have any interaction with any authorities. So they're not going to get the vaccine and they're not going to get the vaccine passport. Then you add in all the criminals who will behave likewise and you end up with a figure in the multiple millions of people who will face daily discrimination because they don't have this vaccine passport. And we can't allow the precious illegals and criminals to face discrimination, can we? There was even talk that the government feared pubs would be too white if they mandated this vaccine passport for entry. So because of our country's obsession with coddling and caring for migrants more than Brits, the entire scheme could be sunk by our nation's insipid post-colonial self-loathing and white guilt. In summary, and to emphasise, it's not just a COVID certification system. It's a digital ID card. It's not just a vaccine passport, it's the embryonic beginnings of a Chinese communist-style social credit score for the West. Somehow I don't believe the 80% in polls who say they support the vaccine passport system actually understand the true scope of what it entails. And given that it's looking like we'll see a vote on this in Parliament, it's time the UK government was honest with the British public about what's really being proposed here.